You're listening to The Jacob Valk Show. He's breaking down the latest and greatest in sports as only he can. Follow him on Twitter at RealJacobValk. Here he is, Jacob Valk.
Hello, sports fans! Welcome to another edition of the Jacob Valk Show. I am Jacob Valk, and there's a lot of NFL news to get to, along with a couple basketball stories. I can finally talk about another sport that isn't the NFL. It's a miracle. You'll also get my chat with Eric Fischetti a little later on the New York Giants, but I gotta start with a name that I haven't heard in 5 years. And I hate to say it, but if you had asked me when I thought the next time I was going to hear Aldon Smith's name was, sadly, I'd have said the next time he was in prison. But he's back in the NFL. The Dallas Cowboys signed him. And they signed him to, not a record-breaking contract or anything, but no, they signed him to a pretty noticeable deal. A $2 million base salary plus $2 million in sack incentives. Now, the one thing to know about this signing is no guaranteed money. Smart move there by Jerry Jones. Also, I guess it's more than one thing, Aldon Smith is still suspended indefinitely. He applied for reinstatement last month, but he has not been reinstated yet. Let's assume that he will be reinstated, though. It brings up an interesting debate. And look, this isn't an on-the-field issue. We all remember how talented Aldon Smith was. After his rookie year, he looked like he was going to be a fantastic player. And then, after his second year, it looked like he was going to set the sacks record. But he could just never stay out of trouble. His Wikipedia page has a whole section entitled Legal Issues. It's 10 paragraphs long. This guy is a jailbird. I hate to say it, but he just is. I don't have a good reason for why he's had so many run-ins with the law, but this guy has a rap sheet that would put John Dillinger to shame. Does he deserve another chance? This isn't even a second chance. This is an 11th chance. I mean, seriously, this guy got into a bunch of issues when he was with the 49ers. He got cut after an alleged hit and run after driving under the influence. Was released by the Niners, signed with the Raiders, actually kept his nose clean, but the NFL suspended him for a year midway through the 2015 season. The Raiders chose to stick with him, but then after a domestic violence incident in 2018, the Raiders cut him. And in 2017, he had 2 legal issues, and he wasn't granted reinstatement during the 2016 or 2017 season. Does this guy deserve another chance? That's the thing. Look, I understand that he's paid his debts to society, and, it brings up an interesting debate, not in the NFL, but in our country. What is the purpose of the prison system? It should be punishment and rehabilitation, but more often than not, it's just punishment. There are a lot of people who, if they make one stupid mistake and they spend time in jail, that's it. It haunts them for the rest of their lives. They can't vote. They can't get a job. They're ostracized. There's definitely an issue in this country about that, but if you look at it strictly from an NFL standpoint, playing in the NFL is not a right, it's a privilege. And, again, we all know how talented Aldon Smith was, but this guy hasn't played in the NFL in 5 years. Obvious statement of the year coming up. He's lost a step. There are better players available than Aldon Smith. I don't mind teams giving players second chances or even third chances. At the end of the day, if you're talented enough, teams do that. But this is a guy who has never been able to keep his head above water. Now, it seems like he's gotten his life back on track. I really haven't heard his name in a long time. Quite honestly, I had forgotten about him. But I saw his name flash across Twitter. I thought he had gotten the coronavirus. The last thing I expected was for him to sign with the Cowboys. Now, the Cowboys have a history of doing this stuff. Bringing in these guys with checkered histories. Randy Gregory, Greg Hardy, Pac-Man Jones, Rolando McClain, Lel Collins, but this is different. This guy hasn't been in the NFL in 5 years. This guy has an alcohol problem. Now, maybe he's gotten it under control. I hope he has. At the end of the day, he does have a right to provide for himself and his family. But does he have a right to go back in the NFL? I don't know. I really see it both ways. I understand that he's paid his debt to the NFL, but this guy keeps getting into legal issues. He just does. If he had kept his nose clean for 5 years, yes, bring him back in. Long overdue. This guy just keeps getting arrested. In June, he was arrested for driving under the influence. Look, I really see it both ways in terms of the Cowboys bringing him in. If his claim for reinstatement is denied, then the Cowboys can cut him, no problem. No guaranteed money on his contract. If he gets reinstated, the Cowboys have a great backup for Sean Lee. Lord knows he needs it. Should he be reinstated? That's a tough question. It's a really tough question. It's one that I don't have the answer to. I'd probably lean towards no, just because he keeps getting into trouble with the law, but if he has really turned his life around since June, a lot of things can happen in 10 months. 10 months ago, if I had told you something about the coronavirus, you'd have said, that sounds like some form of alcohol poisoning after drinking too many Coronas. A lot can happen in 10 months. Maybe he has turned his life around. I hope he has for his sake. If I was an NFL owner or an NFL GM, I'd have a tough time bringing him back into the league, but I don't hate the move. I don't love the move. I'm really torn on it. I'd love to give a hot take, but I have to hedge. I really, really do. Moving on now to a lot less controversial of a story in the Titans bringing back Kamale Correa for 1 year at $3.5 million. And I think it's a really good move for the Titans. Correa finally lived up to his potential that he had in 2016 when he was drafted by the Ravens. He was a second-round pick out of Boise State. He had talent, but he was never able to put it together until this past year, like a lot of other Titans. According to Pro Football Focus, last year he had a 67.8 overall grade. And I'll tell you, even by just watching him, you could tell he was an insanely different player. The Titans had to bring him back. He was a key rotational defensive player for him. The contract is very fair. I like the move. Moving on now to the Texans, signing Timmy Jernigan to a 1-year deal worth at least $1.25 million. It can go up to $3.75 million, and that is a great move. They saw DJ Reader leave in free agency. While Jernigan is nowhere near as good as Reader, he has always been a very good player in this league. He started all of the Eagles' second half games. He played really well, 65.9 overall grade according to Pro Football Focus. Played really well in their playoff game. While Jernigan is not the long-term answer, the Texans do need to draft a defensive tackle in 3 weeks. He'll be able to hold down the fort for a year very effectively. Really good move for the Texans. Moving on now to the Niners cutting Mike Person. And look, I understand that they are in cap hell. They had to trade DeForest Buckner. They signed Eric Armstead. They're in salary cap hell. I understand that. But Person was a good player for them last year. 61.8 overall grade according to Pro Football Focus. He wasn't great, but he was good. You want to tell me you can find a better right guard in the draft? You can tell me that. I don't mind the 49ers cutting him. It brings up kind of an interesting point. You don't need to have a full team right now. It's the offseason. You really need to have a full team after the draft. Because after that, there's no other opportunity to get really good players until the end of the preseason. And even then, what are the quality of the players you're getting then? Remember when the Bills cut LeSean McCoy? Everyone thought they were nuts. He went to the Chiefs. Everyone thought he was going to be really good. He was just okay. I remember the Jets so desperate for cornerback help. There were fans of them screaming for these average cornerbacks that were cut to come to the team. No, it doesn't work like that. It's just a backup plan. If your fans are clamoring for you to add talent after the preseason, you've done a terrible job of building your roster. That's not a legitimate roster building strategy. The quality of the players is not as good. You want to tell me you can find diamonds in the rough? Alright, fine. It's easier said than done, though. I don't mind the Niners cutting Person. They do need to draft a right guard. Tom Compton is not the answer. Believe me, I saw him play last year a lot. And it's going to be interesting to see if the Niners do anything else to help their cap situation. They only have a little over $13 million in cap space, according to overthecap.com. That's not a lot of room when you factor in the fact that they need to sign their draft picks, and they're going to have to make in-season moves to account for injuries. Let's see if they do anything else. Alright, on to basketball now, and a pretty interesting Knicks story. Now, I am not grasping at straws here. No, this is actually pretty big, and it warrants talking about. And that is, according to Stephen Bondi of the Daily News right here in New York, Elton Brand may be a candidate to be the Knicks GM. Keith Pompey of the Philadelphia Inquirer said a little over an hour later that the Sixers have no intention of letting him go, but it's still worthy of being talked about. I actually like the move. If they bring in Brand, I think it makes sense. This is a guy who's been really aggressive since taking over as Sixers GM. Traded for Jimmy Butler, traded for Tobias Harris, signed Al Horford, traded for Alec Burks and Glenn Robinson. Now, granted, the Sixers have underachieved this year, and they're not going to win an NBA title, but I don't think that's Brand's fault. I think that's Brett Brown's fault. I think Brett Brown is a terrible coach. He got a lot of leeway due to the fact that he was there during the process, but he just has never been able to push this team over the hump. There are some people that don't like what Elton Brand has done with the Sixers. They don't like the fit of Al Horford. They don't like the way the team is constructed, not enough shooting. Look, when you have Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid, yeah, you're not going to have a lot of shooting. You know, it's up to the coach to implement a system that doesn't rely on shooting as much. You want to tell me that they should add better wing shooters? Alright, you can make that argument. But that's why he traded for Burks and Robinson. Now, granted, they have fallen off a cliff since coming to Philly, but they were playing really well for the Warriors. No reason to think that they'd fall off. Again, I think that's a Brett Brown issue. The one thing that kind of scares me about this, and I may come off as a Knicks hater here, which is fair because I hate the Knicks. This is really keeping in line with what the Knicks have done in the past. It's what's gotten them in trouble before, chasing guys who are obsessed with just acquiring talent, not taking other things into consideration. I understand that Elton Brand is nowhere near as bad as Isaiah Thomas, but some of those trades that Brand has made haven't worked out the way that people thought they would. Now again, I don't think it's his fault. I think it's Brett Brown's fault. And the Knicks need to hire the right coach. Make no mistake about it, they don't have the luxury of getting this wrong. If they get it wrong, bye-bye R.J. Barrett and bye-bye Mitchell Robinson. Tom Thibodeau would make sense. Kenny Atkinson would make more sense. The Knicks need to get the coaching hire right. I don't mind the Knicks bringing in Brand as GM, even though it seems unlikely. Worldwide Wes is also going to be a part of that front office in some way. According to Bondi, Leon Rose also has interest in hiring Brock Aller from the Cavaliers, who is very, very good with the salary cap and finding loopholes in that, making it work to their advantage. So, look, Worldwide West, I don't like that fit. I don't like the idea of multiple agents being in the same front office. Leon Rose is going to need guys who know the NBA front office landscape. You want to tell me that Leon Rose knows these players? He knows the game? Fine. He doesn't know the inner workings of front offices like he thinks he does. There's no substitute for experience. He's never been on that side of it before. Once you've made that transition from agent to GM, it's really different. Arn Tellem learned that firsthand. Brody Van Wagenen has learned that firsthand. Bob Myers and Rob Pelinka, when they were originally hired, they were not decision makers right away. Pelinka learned under Magic Johnson, and Bob Myers learned under someone else. I don't remember off the top of my head. They need a guy like Brand. They really do. If it's not Elton Brand, then it has to be someone with experience. It can't be Worldwide Wes. If Worldwide Wes is their GM, that's really bad. You want to make him assistant GM? I don't mind that. You want to make Brock Aller another assistant GM or come up with some crazy salary cap title for him? I don't mind that. But they need a former NBA GM. It's just that simple. Oh, Larry Riley. That's who Myers was assistant GM for. Larry Riley. Okay. That was going to kill me. I do want to talk about a pretty noticeable college basketball death. And look, I understand that this guy isn't a household name, and you may not care about him unless you're a Wake Forest fan, but, you know, the simple fact is, for the early 80s, Wake Forest was a perennially good team, and the coach of those teams passed away today in Carl Tacey. Tacey actually started at Marshall in 71-72 and led that team to a 23-4 record before losing an incredibly high-scoring March Madness game to Louisiana Lafayette, 112-101. Interesting fact, you know who was on that Marshall team? Mike D'Antoni. Mike D'Antoni was a player for that team. Put up 17 points and 5 rebounds, if you round up. After that, he went to Wake Forest, and it took him a while to really get going. His first few teams were not that good, but then he laid the foundation for the success that was to come. 76-77, he made March Madness. They lost in the Sweet 16. They were a good team, anchored by Rod Griffin, Skip Brown, Jerry Schellenberg, and Frank Johnson. but they couldn't duplicate that success the year after. Even though they went 19-10, they missed out on March Madness. After that, the Demon Deacons fell off for a couple of years, but then in 1980, something clicked. And in the 80-81 season, with Frank Johnson taking a step up, and his supporting cast of Jim Johnstone, Alvis Rogers, and Mike Helms, the Demon Deacons were back in March Madness, narrowly losing to Boston College, 67-64. After that, though, something interesting happened. Tacey's teams were usually built around offense. Well, the 81-82 team was built around defense. If you look at points against per game, they have the 27th best defense in the nation. A stark contrast from his previous teams. They had a well-rounded offense with Helms, Danny Young, who was probably their best defender, Johnstone, and Guy Morgan. The thing is, though, they didn't have that go-to guy. And even though they were able to steamroll Old Dominion in the first round, the second round, they narrowly lost to Memphis, 56-55. They would have won that game if they had a go-to scorer. Without going too far down the rabbit hole, Memphis had that go-to scorer in Keith Lee. Wake Forest didn't. That's why they lost that game. That game really stuck in their craw, as the year after that, they missed out on March Madness, even though they went 20-12. A 500 record in the ACC didn't help. And Tacey's last March Madness appearance came the year after that, on the backs of guys like Kenny Green, Delaney Rudd, and Anthony Tichy. He also had Muggsy Bogues in his first year at Wake Forest, although he barely played. Wake Forest actually had a pretty good March Madness in 84, as they upset the number one team in their region in DePaul, beat them by 2 in the Sweet 16, and then they came really close to winning their Elite 8 game against the Houston Cougars, who would later lose to Georgetown in Fred Brown's redemption game. I understand that Patrick Ewing was the star of that team, but after Brown threw the ball away to James Worthy, Brown really wanted that title. He wanted it more than anyone. I can promise you that. Carl Tacey is one of the best coaches in Wake Forest basketball history. Was one of the better college basketball coaches of the early 1980s, and will be deeply missed. Alright, here's my chat with Eric Fischetti.
You're listening to the Jacob Valk Show. I am Jacob Valk. And on Tuesday, you heard the chat that I had with Dominic Arbolino about the Jets. I knew that this guy would get jealous. I didn't want him to come over to my house when the quarantine was over, so I figured I'd chat with him now. Eric Fischetti is on the line. Eric, how are you?
I'm good, Jacob, and I'm feeling even better knowing that I'm a pity chat.
Hey, could be worse. Could be Brandon.
That's not fair. Brandon's a good guy. Miss him. Shout out Brandon Johnson.
Yes. So we are going to be talking New York Giants, and we'll get into what they did in the offseason in a minute. But I want to talk about last year, because regardless of how Daniel Jones finishes his career. Whether he's a bust or whether he's a future Hall of Famer, we don't know. But what we do know is that last season is one of the most important seasons in New York Giants history. The end of an era, Eli Manning riding off into the sunset. It was great that he got back to 500, and Daniel Jones taking over and looking good. He didn't look great, but he looked good. There are glimpses of talent there. What are your thoughts on how the Giants finished last year? What are your thoughts on Jones? Let me hear.
So a couple of things. I think that, and this is going back a while, probably right after week 2, after the Giants lost in, let's be honest, embarrassing fashion to the Buffalo Bills, a team that ended up being really, really good last year. But at the time, it was a very embarrassing loss.
Well, how do you think I felt? My kicker missed 2 extra points. I mean, how do you think I feel?
No. Is he still in the league?
Vedvik is on a practice squad somewhere. I know that, but if I'll tell you what, if he were to drop dead tomorrow, I'd dance on his grave. I'm still furious with him.
Oh man, that week 1 against Buffalo was rough. But week 2, I mean, Buffalo ended up being a great team. But considering how the Giants lost to Buffalo, the shocking development of the year, nothing will ever, take it down, is the quickness to pull the plug on Eli Manning. And you know that Shermer wanted to do that the minute they drafted Jones. But, of course, John Mara didn't want to do that because, for a couple of reasons. Eli's getting older. Last year of his contract. Wellington Mara's last, first-round selection. So, of course, there was an emotional connection from Eli Manning to the Maras. And I knew that going in, and a lot of Giants fans knew that going in. So I think that the quickness to pull the plug on Eli was probably the biggest shocker of the NFL year last year because no one saw that coming. I was even quoted in saying that I didn't think Jones was going to play last year, but I'm very, very happy that he did.
Yeah, no question about that. I mean, you saw the talent there. If he didn't play at all last year and you were going into this year with Daniel Jones as the unknown guy, he's your quarterback for this coming year, and you didn't see him play at all, you would be really nervous right now. But you saw the talent there. What do you think of Jones? I understand 1 year, less than a year actually, but what are your thoughts on him?
I like what I have seen. I think that the dissection of the season was thrown way out the window since week 3 because now it's basically just a free season. Whatever happens, happens. Daniel Jones last year threw for over 3,000 yards, 24 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, had a QBR of 87.7. Now, the numbers, kind of, jump out at you in that sense. But what doesn't tell the story is the fumbles. The fumbles was such a big issue last year, but that is something that can be fixed. Now, overall, I was very impressed what I saw out of Daniel Jones. Considering that he was cool and calm under pressure. It's a quarterback that can run. I haven't seen that my entire tenure of being a Giants fan because the only quarterbacks that I have known was the late tenure of Kurt Warner and all of Eli Manning's career. Eli Manning, as you know, was a statue in the pocket.
You're older than me, though. I thought you remembered Tarkenton.
No, I'm not that old. I remember Sims. But, most quarterbacks in the early 2000s were pocket passers, so they weren't, moving all around. So already seeing Daniel Jones rush for 2 touchdowns week 3 against Tampa Bay, this is like, whoa, a quarterback can do that? That's amazing. So I am very impressed with what I saw in the first year of his Giants career. Hopefully for the rest of his career I can see him as a Giant. But, there were like a couple of hiccups, which I would expect out of a rookie quarterback. I think that there were certain occasions where he held on to the ball too long. I thought the forced fumbles were an issue. But I also believe that was how he was coached. I don't think that Shermer really, unleashed the full potential of what Daniel Jones could possibly do. I think the only time last year where we really saw what he could do was the back-to-back weeks against Tampa Bay and then Washington because he was able to run the ball as much as he could have. He's been eluding sacks. I remember listening to some Giants games on the radio, and I hear Bob Papa going, and Jones is down. No, wait, he got out. I heard that so many times because I'm so used to, if I hear even just a little bit of pressure on the quarterback was down. I mean, as many times as I heard pressuring the quarterback from the opposing defenses, most times than not, I'm thinking, Eli's going down. So I didn't really know what to expect from Jones. But I really like what I got to see in terms of him being able to use his legs, because that's where most of the quarterbacks are going right now. They can kill you with their arm and their legs. Very small sample size, but I'm really interested to see where, he goes from here, especially with a new coach in that sense, because Joe Judge, who is the new head coach of the New York Giants, I can't believe I'm going to say this. The head coach is actually not calling the plays. It's going to the offensive coordinator, also known as Coach Clapp, Jason Garrett.
A former head coach in Garrett.
Yep, Coach Clapp, as we like to call him. But listen, this is like an era of Giants football that I'm not used to. Because with Tom Coughlin, he was already established. He won a Super Bowl. He won 2 Super Bowls. People got very impatient. Ben McAdoo, he was working with Green Bay. He worked with Aaron Rodgers. So we weren't patient over there either. And then with Shermer, he was in the forefront with what was going on in Minnesota and Case Keenum. We weren't forced to be patient. I don't know a damn thing about Joe Judge. So now I'm actually forced to be patient and see how this works out. I'm actually incredibly excited for the season.
Well, I mean, look, you should be excited. You have the hot young quarterback coming into his second year. And as Mike Francesa says, the best thing that rookie quarterbacks do is become sophomore quarterbacks. But the one thing I would say to Giants fans, and I hope you'll agree with me, Daniel Jones is not a sure thing. There are a lot of issues there that he needs to correct. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that, but that goes for any rookie quarterback coming into the league. I'm not going to sit here. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Daniel Jones is going to be better than Eli Manning, because you know what? We don't know. Nobody knows. If anyone tells you that they know, they're lying. But listen, is Jones good from 1 year on paper? Yes. Is Jones good by the numbers? Yes. I think he's good by the numbers. I like what I have seen. But when you watch every single game, there are mistakes that need to be fixed, as I mentioned before. Holding on to the ball for too long, ball security, that's a really big issue. Giants lost a couple of games that way where he couldn't hold on to the ball. And
yeah, remember Jamal Adams?
Yeah, I do. I was at that game, and so were you.
So was I. That was nice. I had better seats than you.
I just wanted to tell you really quick, that was my first Giants game in years, and regardless of the outcome, I had an outstanding time.
Yeah, I'm not one of those people who, if my team loses, it's like, oh, why did I even go to the game? Woe is me. I could have stayed in bed. No, I'm not one of those people. I just like going to the games. Now, having said that, I don't want to see my team blown out, but if they're competitive and they lose, all right. You're not going to go 16-0 every year.
And if you remember from that game, both the Giants and Jets both played very, very competitively.
Yes, they did. I'm telling you. I'm telling you, Eric. Adam Gase, the fact that he didn't let that team fold in that game, good head coach in my book. I'm an Adam Gase fan. You know that.
I do know that. You've been a Gase guy since he got hired. I think the jury's still out. I think it's incomplete, but as of right now, I think he's showing more good than bad.
I'll take it. It's better than what I've heard from other football fans. While we're on the subject of coaches, you brought up Joe Judge a little earlier. What are your thoughts on him? What were your thoughts when he was hired? Let me hear.
Well, Joe Judge was not a name that I even knew. He was not a name that I even considered. The only thing that I knew about him was that he worked under Bill Belichick and Nick Saban. And already, if you just mention that alone, that's attractive on a resume. He's worked under one of the greatest college head coaches that we have ever seen, and he's worked under one of the greatest head coaches in the NFL that we've ever seen.
I'm going to stop you right there. The Belichick coaching tree, that means nothing to me. That is a bad group. Go back and look at the Belichick coaching tree. That means nothing to me.
Hey, listen, I get it. The tracking record isn't there. The track record is not good. But you would think that that's got to end at some point. I'm not saying it's Judge. I'm not going to sit here and tell you, this guy is Bill Parcells. No, he's not that at all. I don't know who he is, but I can tell you the comparisons. I mean, Harbaugh was a special teams guy. Parcells was a special teams guy at one point, and they both turned out okay. I mean, It's not an unpopular thing to find coaches, to find no-name coaches, as I'm saying that in air quotes, in special teams. I mean, the guys that I really wanted was McCarthy, who is now in Dallas. I was really looking at Eric Bieniemy, who was the offensive coordinator in Kansas City. Those were two of the biggest guys that I was looking at for the Giants. Thankfully, they did interview them. McCarthy kind of, but Bieniemy they did. Listen, I believe that the Giants fell in love with the hard-nosed mentality, no-nonsense BS from Joe Judge. I think that's what they fell in love with. And you know what? There's no better impression than a first impression. And I watched that Joe Judge press conference, and I felt like I wanted to run through a wall after he was finished speaking. And that's a really big deal, in my opinion. See, I really think that the first interview, or like the first exposure as a new player or a new head coach or just a new coach in general to a new group of fans, I think you need to make a very good first impression. I didn't get that with McAdoo, and I didn't get that with Shermer. Because with McAdoo and Shermer, they were kind of like these laid-back guys. Joe Judge is like, all right, enough. I'm tired of the losing. And I'm like, yeah, you know? So I'm tired of the losing too. And so I honestly think that Joe Judge, as of right now, could be a decent hire. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it'll work. I hope it would work. I hope that the next head coach isn't hired within 2 years, because that's been too much of a constant in terms of the Giants. They've been hiring coaches. They hire general managers. It's kind of like New York Knicks-esque, but a little bit better. It's been a revolving door as of recently, and that can't fly. That does not happen with good franchises. It just doesn't happen.
Well stated, Eric.
Yeah, it doesn't happen. When the Giants had Coughlin and Reese, as much as I did not like Reese, he stayed here for a while, and they were consistent, and they won Super Bowls. They were in the playoffs. They won playoff games. They were competitive. They were competitive for the division. Since Ben McAdoo in 2016, the Giants have been nothing but garbage.
And even towards the end of Coughlin's tenure, they were garbage.
Yeah, and Coughlin was even fighting for his job. I mean, do you remember Odell Beckham Jr. for Josh Norman? That
very
wouldn't
much
happen.
so.
That wouldn't happen in prime Coughlin. Coughlin was fighting for his job. But since the end of Coughlin's tenure with the Giants, they have not been good, except for 1 year. One fluke year.
10-6.
2016 was a fluke year. It was awful because you know what happened? Because Jerry Reese was
signed every free agent available. Vernon, Damon Harrison. You went out and you spent your money finally.
Yeah, exactly. And then what happened? Their contracts were awful. You couldn't move on from them, and they got worse and worse. So Gettleman, when he got hired, was really picking up the pieces from Jerry Reese. And the only good thing I can say about Dave Gettleman right now, because you know what, the jury's still out on him, and I want to touch on him in a second, is
I'll let you.
drafting.
I just want to say one thing on Judge.
Yeah.
The old school football mentality that he has, I appreciate it. The thing is, though, I'm not sure if that flies in today's NFL. When you look at a guy like Tom Coughlin, who, quite honestly, Judge reminded me of when I was watching that press conference. He reminded me a lot of Coughlin. You know, that old school mentality just doesn't fly anymore. Look how Coughlin ended in Jacksonville. He was run out of town on a rail. That makes me a little scared. What's your response to that?
I think it's fair. I honestly think it's a fair evaluation of the hard-nosed, hard-minded coaches, because players in this day of age, and I'm not even generalizing, it's just fact from what I've seen, they need to be patted on the back. They need to be, oh, you did such a good job. They're those kind of players.
But look at a guy like Brady. Look at a guy like Brady, an older player, leaves the hardest-nosed coach in the history of sport in Bill Belichick to go to an easy coach to play foreignarians.
I honestly think with Brady, and by the way, you got to be happy about that.
I was doing backflips.
Oh, I bet you were. But Tampa Bay was kind of a shock. That's over 20 years of service for the same guy. I think he deserved to have his own choice of where to go in that sense. Although I didn't think that was going to happen, he kind of earned it.
Of course he did. No question.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on Gettleman?
Listen, his free agent signings have not been the greatest. but his drafting has been really, really good as of late, which brings me up to a point. Jay Glazer, who I really, really enjoy. I think that his reporting is
Smart
spot
guy.
on. I think, love him. He's Michael Strahan's best friend. But he mentioned, I believe within this week, he said that if the Giants don't have a winning record, Gettleman is gone. And to me, I don't think that's fair. Because considering where they were last year, like I said, the record, everything went out the window as soon as you put Jones in. They went 4-12 last year. So what if the Giants go 6-10 and Jones shows incredible improvements and they lose not on their own accord? Are you still going to fire Gettleman? It doesn't make sense.
No, that's a good point. I was going to say I agree with Glazer, but no, that's a fair point. I mean, look, you can't evaluate Gettleman solely on Jones. You have to evaluate him on this coming draft and who he signed, and Bradbury and Martinez, and DeAndre Baker needs to take a big step up. He was atrocious last year. Oh, my God. Him and Sam Beal, too. Whenever Beal was on the field, he looked terrible.
I also think that was probably scheme also. So
all right.
I think that's up in the air because Patrick Graham, one of the coaching hires that Joe Judge did, he is not like a 4-3 or 3-4 kind of guy. I think he's a game-by-game guy because he does run both, and he does have connections with the Giants. He was there for a little bit, and he has connections with Joe Judge in New England. So that kind of makes me happy, number one, with the familiarity with the place that you were and with the coach that you were with. So that kind of makes me happy. But I just want to touch on Gettleman again. Giants were 4-12 last year, and a lot of the times they won with good quarterback play. Those were the 4 games that they won. The good quarterback play with Eli or Daniel Jones, right? So the majority of the games that they lost, you can pick it out, I can pick it out, anybody can pick it out. Their defense was awful.
Right.
Their defense was
no question.
awful. So how can you possibly blame Gettleman? Like, let's just say that the Giants do go
defensive players.
I agree, but considering what Gettleman has done in free agency thus far, you re-signed David Mayo for 3 years, which I liked, by the way. That was the first piece of Giants news that I saw that wasn't Leonard Williams. But, David Mayo filled in for...
Another thing. That's another thing that you have to give Gettleman flack for. That trade has not worked out so far.
I do, and I remember telling you that. I remember saying that if Leonard Williams goes, so should you, because that is just a Bush League trade that shouldn't have been made. That's a trade that you make. Like, if the Patriots made a trade for Leonard.
Even if he had walked, let's say he walks, he goes somewhere else. Okay,
right.
Yeah, fire Gettleman, I'm with you there. But let's say you sign him to a long-term deal. Do you really want to sign Leonard Williams to a long-term deal? This guy only had half a sack for you.
No, but you have to.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, but you shouldn't have been in that position.
I agree with you. That's why that trade came so out of nowhere for me. And if I'm Joe Douglas, I would have made that trade 10 times out of 10.
I loved it. I was doing backflips of it. I told you when I called into WHBC Sports Talk that the Jets fleeced the Giants. You guys didn't agree with me. Believe it or not, Eric, I actually know a little bit about sports.
Yeah, I missed that. But yeah, I mean, at the time I didn't agree because there was something in me that said, well, maybe it's a change of scenery. Maybe the defensive coordinator might be a little bit better than Greg Williams at this point. He wasn't.
There are very few defensive coordinators that are better than Greg Williams.
And you know what? It showed because considering how the Jets defense played towards the end of the year, oh my God, I would have taken
monstrous. Absolutely monstrous. If you can make Bless Austin, Arthur Marlette, and Maurice Kennedy look like good NFL cornerbacks, you're doing something right.
Oh, for sure. But considering what the Giants have did in free agency, going back to Gettleman on the defensive side of the ball, you signed David Mayo to a 3-year deal. He filled in for Connolly when he tore his ACL. Good signing. Don't mind it. Might have been 2 years longer than I expected for the deal, but nonetheless a good signing.
I like
Leonard Williams, your franchise tag, you had to, so there's no possible way that I could be mad at that. Blake Martinez was such a good signing because on top of that, I'm going to give you some praise. You cut Alec Ogletree, who was a disaster, who I tried to find every little piece of good that I could have and admittingly, it was hard. It was incredibly hard to find good when it came to Alec Ogletree. The only thing I can come up with is that he was an emotional leader. Great. Awesome. Can emotional leaders tackle?
No.
I mean, no.
Where's my old applause sound effect when I need it?
So Blake Martinez was a good signing. Kyler Fackrell, also at the Packers, was a beast with the Packers at one point. I believe he had 8 sacks in one game against Seattle. Who has a good offensive line, attacking a guy like Russell Wilson who can run all over the place. That really speaks volumes.
Let me ask you this. How much of a role do you think Fackrell is going to play for you next year? Because when I saw that, I'm like, wait a minute, why are you signing Fackrell? You have Carter, you have Jimenez. Where do you see Fackrell playing?
I think Fackrell is going to get the bulk of snaps on defense, if I'm going to be completely honest with you.
You do, okay.
And it's only because he has more experience.
But don't you want to play your young guns?
Oh, no, I do. But it also depends on the situation and who you're playing in that sense, because maybe Fackrell can play as a teacher in some ways to Jimenez or Carter. Carter has been kind of underwhelming the past 2 years. O'Shane Jimenez, the draft pick out of Old Dominion, the first draft pick out of Old Dominion, by the way, has shown really good progress. Couple of sacks against Philadelphia, against Carson Wentz, another guy that can run around. That really speaks volumes to me when you can catch up with a running quarterback. That means you got speed, and that means you got heart, and you don't quit on the play. And I really like what I see out of Jimenez.
Let me go back to Martinez for a sec. It's okay that you like that signing. He has talent. He's young. I'm with you there. Here's my issue, though.
Sure.
Why didn't you sign Corey Littleton?
I have no idea.
You have the money. You have the money.
I know.
What is with these GMs with gobs and gobs of cap space? You go on about, we've created cap space, we've created flexibility, and then you don't use it. The Jets are the same way.
I've seen
what
that.
is going on here?
Honestly, I think it's some general managers. I'm not saying this is right, but I think that some general managers have in their mind that you can probably find a second-tier guy that will work harder and play harder than the first-tier guys for less money. I mean, just think of it this way. Jadeveon Clowney is still on the market.
Oh, my God. I want the Jets to sign him so badly, Eric.
I don't even know where he'll go. I don't know who's going to pay him that money.
A team that has the money has to give it to him. It's just that simple. What's going to happen? He's going to sit, unsigned in September? I mean, my God.
Listen, I'm not saying it's right, but some general managers are like that. Some general managers are like, why am I going to pay this top guy who might not be as good as people say they are when I can get this second-tier guy for less money that is possibly better than them?
Look, you're probably right that there are GMs who think that they know more than everyone else. They think they're smarter than everyone else in the room, and while everyone is enamored with a guy like Jadeveon Clowney or Corey Littleton, then you can sign a guy like Jordan Jenkins or Blake Martinez. I'm with you there, but, the simple fact is if the majority of people are saying that Clowney is better than Jenkins and Littleton is better than Martinez, that usually means there's something there.
No, I agree with you. All I'm saying is that some general managers would rather not break the bank for certain players. It drives me absolutely crazy because I did want Littleton, but Vegas paid him the money. And also, another reason why I don't think that the Giants went after Littleton, I think they have the hots for Isaiah Simmons.
We'll get into the draft a little later, but I want you to touch on Bradbury.
I love it. And the reason why I love it is that considering his tape, he is already the Giants' number one cornerback. There's no way around it. He is. He's the guy right now.
I'm with you there.
And he also came out and said that, he was kind of blindsided by the Giants giving him a contract, which, is a little too honest for my liking. But, Janoris Jenkins was a little too honest for my liking. The Giants needed a cornerback. They needed to address their defense. And already Bradbury was one of the top cornerbacks on the market, unless you wanted to go into the draft which I'm not really comfortable with doing with cornerbacks because that's one of the most important positions in football, especially on defense in my mind. So
hey, how do you think I feel?
Listen, I get it.
Oh, jeez.
I completely get it.
Pierre Desir, Brian Poole, Arthur Mollett, and Bless Austin. Yeah, that's going to win a Lombardi Trophy.
Hey, some of those guys actually played well.
Yeah, I understand that, but, I mean, you have the money. Spend it on Byron Jones, for God's sake. Please.
What a move by Miami, by the way.
Miami's going to be scary this year. They're going to finish with a better record than people think they're going to. Your father must be happy.
If he even likes the Dolphins anymore. He's been so beaten down by them.
Here's my thing with Bradbury. And, look, I understand that you had the money, and I can't begrudge a team for spending a lot of money if you have it. But you have to spend it the correct way. I understand, teams not wanting to break the bank and go crazy in free agency. They want to build through the draft. I get that. It's easier said than done, but I get that. But there is no excuse to overpay for marginal talent. And James Bradbury has never had a Pro Football Focus grade of over 70. You watch him play with the Panthers. He's not a world beater. You're paying him like a world beater. You're playing him like a number one corner. That's got to scare you. What are your thoughts on that?
I get it. And especially when it comes to free agency, you need to overpay to get your guy. I mean, it's the harsh reality because that's one of the constants that always comes out of free agency. How do you pay this guy this and this guy gets this? It's just the reality. If you want your guy so bad, you need to shed out the money. And that's also probably one of the reasons why the Giants didn't get Littleton, because they shed out so much money for a cornerback that might be a B-plus level talent that you can't get Corey Littleton, who in my mind is a solid A-level talent, especially on linebacker, who the Giants haven't had since injury-prone John Beeson.
Hey, I'll take Littleton over Bradbury any day of the week, I'll tell you that.
I would too, but it's such a tough call. It really is, because there's a part of me that really thinks that the Giants are really looking forward into the draft to address some of their defensive needs, which, considering at number 4, is one of the more valuable picks in the draft at this point in time.
It's the fourth most valuable one.
Oh, of course. At this point, yeah, for sure. But listen, would I have rather given that money to Littleton? Yes. But considering that you needed to fill a need, it's hard for me to get mad at the contract. You just better play up to it. You're getting out of a system in Carolina where, let's be honest, it's a complete unknown. But the Giants are an unknown too. 2 new head coaches, 2 young new head coaches. One of them has more head coaching experience than the other in Matt Rule, but you don't really know how you're going to get used. And at least in New York in particular, at least I can go back and seeing a Patrick Graham defense and seeing, okay, that's how I'm going to be used. That's where I want to play. That's where I want to be implemented. In Carolina, I can't really say that right now.
And you saw Garrett's offense for all those years. What were your thoughts on the Garrett hire?
Loved it. The only thing that I don't like about the Garrett hire is that I don't think he's the greatest head coach. I think he's very underwhelming as a head coach. I honestly think that the Cowboys are better off with McCarthy than he is Garrett, but other than that, water is wet. I don't think Garrett is a guy that can really get you over the top. I think he can give you sustained success. That's about it. But I don't think he's that guy that can lead you to a Super Bowl. And my problem with this hire is that if all fails with Joe Judge, that's your new head coach.
Well, you're not going to fire him midway through the season. That's not going to happen.
No, I know that. But the thing is, let's say 2 years down the line, the Giants didn't change at all, and they're getting antsy, they get, impatient, and the Giants finish with a sub-500 record again. They fire Joe Judge.
In that case.
Gettleman might already be gone.
Right, so you're getting rid of Garrett anyway. I'm not sure I understand your point.
What I'm saying is that let's say all fails with Joe Judge because he has never been a head coach. Garrett has. If all fails with Joe Judge, you will promote Jason Garrett to be your head coach, and that's the thing that scares me.
Well, not necessarily. Let's say that the new GM, because if Judge fails, Gettleman's gone. If Joe Judge implodes like Freddie Kitchens imploded, Gettleman does not survive that. The new GM is going to come in, and he may not hire Garrett. I'm not sure I agree with that. Plus,
okay,
Garrett,
well, that's fair.
Even if Judge succeeds, let's say Judge succeeds, and this was my whole thing. The Giants wanted Jason Garrett. It's clear they did. That was rumored from the outset. Why wasn't Garrett hired as head coach? Because let's say Daniel Jones succeeds, has a great year, and he lifts the Giants to a 7-9, 8-8 record, whatever, best case scenario. Jason Garrett is being hired as a head coach somewhere else. The Giants are not going to be able to keep him. Why wouldn't you just hire Garrett as head coach?
Listen, I don't know, because now that you bring it up at that point, the Giants wanted Garrett for a long time. They wanted Garrett instead of Pat Shurmur if the Cowboys let him go. So
right.
It's been clear for years, since Tom Coughlin was here, that, Mara and Tisch liked Jason Garrett. And also a part of why they liked Jason Garrett is because of the familiarity with the team. Jason Garrett was a backup quarterback for the Giants at one point. People tend to forget about that.
No, you're right.
And the reason why, the Giants like that is because the Giants are all the sense of family and tradition and not thinking outside of the box. This is one of those things where the Joe Judge hire was outside of the box because he wasn't affiliated with the Giants in any way, shape, or form. But,
I'll tell you what the Joe Judge hire was. It was a panic move. Because you got to remember, at like 9 or 10 a.m. that morning, when I'm driving to Best Buy to pick up the Joker DVD, I hear, I have FAN on, and I hear that the Panthers swooped in and hired Matt Rule. All the Giants fans are going nuts. How do you not get this guy? This is the guy you wanted. We knew that they had Rule as number one. Garrett was number two. Rule was number one. Would you agree with that?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So then what happened was, in my mind, the Giants heard everyone screaming and moaning. They knew that the Giants fans didn't like Garrett. I know you do. You're fine. You're smarter than the average Giants fan. I've said that before. You're a good Giants fan. You like Garrett. You're very welcome. The majority of Giants fans don't like Garrett. They've killed him every chance they could. The Giants listen to their fans. That's usually not the best move. They should have stuck to their guns and hired their number two. Joe Judge wasn't their number two.
No, but something had to blow them away with Joe Judge. Something had to. Because
it was a panic move. That's what it was. They wanted a head coach.
Well, I'd like to think that my new head coach isn't a panic move, but at this point, it really does seem like it because you're absolutely correct. Matt Rule was the number one choice, and Carolina did not let him leave the state. Smart move. Smart move by the Panthers, offering him, whatever. Because Rule also wanted a ton of control, and who knows if Gettleman even wanted to do that,
Yeah, there's a rumor that the Jets almost hired Matt Rule, but they wanted to dictate who he hired on his staff, and that's why Rule stayed at Baylor. I'm not sure I believe that, but go ahead.
Well, you know what? There's a part of me that does believe that because Matt Rule, in college, he was a very well-established coach, and he could have just went back at any chance that he wanted. If he didn't feel like his field in terms of the offers weren't up to his standard, he could just go right back. He could just go right back to Baylor, who he turned around.
No question.
So he didn't need to come up to the NFL. He just needed to be blown away. And the Panthers are a good organization that actually blew him away and got their guy.
Yeah, and he's going to have fun with Teddy Bridgewater. I like that fit, and they signed Robbie Anderson, which I didn't like. But, let me rephrase. Good fit in Carolina, just don't like that he's not a Jet anymore. Another Joe Douglas thing. I'll tell you, I'm not crazy about Joe Douglas. A lot of Jets fans like him. I'm not crazy about him.
Wait, so where do you stand on him?
I'm not saying that I would fire him. Those words have never come out of my mouth, but I am extremely skeptical of his plan. Here's the thing, Eric. This is the best opportunity that the Jets have had to win the AFC East in 20 years.
Yes.
What do the Jets do? They decide to punt this season, and they're building towards 2021. How does that make any sense? When did you actually try to put the pedal to the metal and actually make the playoffs when you have the third longest playoff drought in the NFL right now, soon to be the longest, because I think the Browns and Buccaneers are making the playoffs this year. This team is a laughingstock.
Listen, and especially considering what every other team in the division has done, with the exception of the Patriots, the Dolphins got a lot better, and look at the Buffalo Bills.
They're seizing the moment. The Jets aren't. You're right.
Yeah, I mean, like Buffalo should win the division next year. They should.
Yeah.
And honestly, if
but you know
all
what?
goes right,
There's no excuse they couldn't have been the Jets. If they had been really aggressive in free agency, really aggressive with trades, there's no excuse that couldn't have been the Jets. You're right that it's the Bills, but it should have been the Jets.
You know what? It should have been, but maybe because I know that you know this, but some fans don't understand. When fans see certain trades, right, they always say, well, why couldn't my team do that? Every single trade is different for every single team. Some teams might ask for more. Some teams might ask for less. So what the Bills gave up for Stephon Diggs could be less than what the Jets needed to give up. I know that you know that, but fans just need to take a step back and realize that not every trade is the exact same for every single team.
No question. I'm with you there 100%. Let's get to the draft. What do you want the Giants to do it for? Is it Isaiah Simmons?
Isaiah Simmons is my number one choice. He is a linebacker. He's honestly
crazy athletic.
He's all you want in a defensive talent. He can play anywhere on the defensive side of the ball. He can be an edge rusher. He can be a linebacker. You can stick him more towards in the secondary. I think that's your guy at 4. But I have been very consistent in saying, if it's not Isaiah Simmons, give me an offensive lineman, because this is a draft where you are loaded in defensive talent and offensive linemen, even wide receivers. It's one of the deeper drafts I've seen in a long time.
Let me tell you, that's part of the reason. That's part of the reason why I don't want the Jets to take a wide receiver at 11. You can get better value later in the draft. But go ahead.
Oh, for sure. This is one of the deepest drafts I've seen in a long time. So I wrote down 3 names. Actually, 1, 2, 3, 5
Oh, you actually
names.
did some homework for this, Eric?
Yeah, I did. I have 5 names written down that I would be okay with. You know, like one of them I'm in love with. The first one is Isaiah Simmons.
Okay.
For the reasons I just mentioned. The other one, which would be a very tough call, because you have to think, if you're the Giants, if you're Dave Gettleman, what's more important to you? Rebuilding your defense or protecting your quarterback? So I have Isaiah Simmons at number 1, and at 2A and 2B, I have Jedrick Wills from Alabama and Tristan Wirfs from Iowa.
Okay. I like Wirfs more than I like Wills, but I don't mind you guys going tackle. I don't mind that at all. I would focus more on a center if I were you guys, but you guys do need to reinforce the offensive line to help Jones, no question.
The only reason why I didn't focus on center is because there's a little bit of rumblings going around that Nick Gates, who filled in on the offensive line more towards the end of the season, can
really
play
well.
center. He did. He can play center. So maybe the Giants cut their losses with Jalapeno, who is kind of like unfortunate, because I really liked him for a long time, and then he just wasn't good.
Yeah. So, hey, look, it happens. I mean, when he never came back from the injury that well, and it happens in the NFL. It's unfortunate, but it's the nature of the beast.
Yeah, it's a shame. He got a torn ACL in Dallas, and then he wasn't the same after that, which is very unfortunate, because I did like how he was playing before the torn ACL. So Other names that I have down, and this is assuming the Giants stay at 4. Mekhi Becton from Louisville and Jeff Okudah, the corner from Ohio State.
Okay. See, now I would focus more on Okudah if he was there, just because I feel like cornerback is a much more pressing need. I could actually see you guys taking 2 cornerbacks in this coming draft. I really, really could. The Jets and the Giants are in the same boat. They both need cornerbacks. Would you agree with that?
Well, the Jets more so, I would think. I just like to hope, because the Giants just traded up a few assets to get DeAndre Baker.
Yeah, Jets need it more. I'm with you there.
Yeah, because if you remember, Sam Beal, I was very high on, got injured during training camp, missed the year.
Do you remember what happened when we were talking about Sam Beal?
Which time?
When he was drafted by the Giants. Do you remember?
Yeah. I think you spilled something and you were freaking out.
I did not spill anything. It's Sean Kim, if you aren't listening, I did not spill anything. The drink tipped over, but nothing spilled out. I was extremely nervous. It took me about 5 minutes to calm down, but nothing spilled. Nothing spilled.
Fair enough. So going back to the cornerback situation, I think the Jets need more cornerback help than the Giants do
I would agree
at
with
this
that.
point in time, only because you invested so much into DeAndre Baker. You traded up for a guy that should have been there in round 2, like easily should have been there in round 2, and you gave up some assets for him, so I'd like to think that he's better than how he played last year. Sam Beal's another guy. Exactly. You can only go up from here. Sam Beal's another guy where you spent a supplemental third-round pick on this guy that a lot of people were high on. Unfortunately, he was sidelined due to injury, so you hope that he can get better with more playing time. I don't know if I would get Okuda. That's why he's more towards the bottom of the guys that I want. I would not be upset with him. Just considering if you're still at 4, if the Giants are still at number 4, Isaiah Simmons is your guy. If you trade back, I thought about a bunch of these scenarios. If you trade back, you can trade back with Miami, you can trade back with the LA Chargers, the Jaguars, the Panthers, the Cardinals. Then if Isaiah Simmons is off the board, you go offensive lineman or Okuda, whoever is there.
See, now let me ask you this. Let's say Okuda and Simmons are on the board at 4. Let's say it's Burrow 1, Young 2, and, I don't know, the Lions throw a curveball at 3. Tristan Wirfs, just hypothetically. Who are you taking, Okuda or Simmons?
Isaiah Simmons.
You're taking Simmons still. Okay.
Yeah, I'm taking Simmons. I honestly think that Isaiah Simmons is so much of a freak athlete on defense that they need. The Giants live for their history of defensive talent, and Isaiah Simmons just fits the bill. I honestly think that, see, now, if Gettleman is really sticking to his guns about eventually seeing a gold jacket on this person, I don't know if I necessarily like that theory because that's so much pressure to put on a kid, but Isaiah Simmons is your guy at 4, assuming you stay there.
I would take Okuda over Simmons, but I understand your point. Eric, I'll get you out on this. I understand that we still have the draft to get through, and we still have training camp, preseason. A million things can happen. But what do you think the record's going to be for the Giants next year?
Oh, boy. Wow. You are throwing me on the spot, aren't you?
You can ballpark it. It's okay.
I would like to give a couple of scenarios. I think that Jones has a mini breakout, like I said earlier, 24-12 in terms of touchdown to interceptions. I'm going to say that Daniel Jones throws for about 28 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. I think that he's going to have a mini breakout. I think Saquon Barkley, if healthy, is going to be in the running for an MVP candidate, maybe, because the shelf life for running backs isn't that great. Yeah, no.
See, this is
cold,
why
right?
This is why I didn't want to have you on. I mean, my God, you're making me cringe here.
What? You don't think it's out of reason that
No,
Barkley, if healthy?
No, the sad part is I don't, but I don't want it to happen. I hate the Giants. I mean, you want Sam Darnold to bust. I want Daniel Jones to bust.
I don't want Darnold to bust. I like Darnold.
You don't want Darnold to bust? Really? But you hate the Jets.
I don't hate the Jets. I hate them because of the rivalry. I mean, like, if the Jets were in the Super Bowl, I wouldn't necessarily root for them. But, you know, like, I don't hate the Jets. I hate the Cowboys, Redskins, and Eagles. I don't hate the Jets.
Well, I hate the Bills, Dolphins, and Patriots, but I put the Giants in that same group, too. Granted, the Giants are lower than them, but, wow, okay. All right. You're less vindictive than me.
I don't hate the Jets. I dislike the Jets.
Okay.
Hate's too much of a strong word for me.
Is that one of those 4-letter words?
No, not really, because there's a few others that I don't like to use. But listen, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility the Giants get 6 wins.
I'm with you there.
6 and 10. 6 and 10, 7 and 9 at best.
I agree with you. I think that is fair. 7 and 9 may be pushing it a little bit, but it's not out of the realm of possibility. I don't mind that at all. All right, Eric, you're the best. Thank you for your time.
No, you are, Jacob. Thanks for giving me an outlet.
All right. That was Eric Fischetti, one of my best friends and one of my former co-hosts on Beyond the Game. Thanks for listening. Here comes the outro.
Thanks for the plug, Jacob from the past. It does mean a lot. Tomorrow, I may give you the trifecta, I may not. I have no idea what the future holds. What I do know is that I am Jacob Valk saying Carthage must be destroyed.